Hello, hello. Tonight, Friday, July 12th, we are launching episode 53 of our Finding Better podcast with Regina Griego. She's going to share her heartbreaking experience in surviving a terrible, terrible family tragedy. More importantly, she's going to talk about what she's doing about it to make the world better for all of us, and especially the children. So please join us. I promise you're going to learn a lot. Thanks. Hello, 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 and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And we're just going to get right into this. And just kind of a forewarning, this may be the most intense conversation that I've ever had. And the reason why I say this is because we're going to talk about tragedy. And it's the kind of tragedy that I have experienced part of myself, but something that is so important, and it's a topic that needs to be discussed. Needs to be discussed. And so my guest today is Regina Griego, and she is the author of a book called Sins of the System: Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. Regina, welcome to Finding Better.
Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me. You and I met in our book in our book journey, as you wrote this book and I wrote my book, American Grit, and I was just so captured by the story of your life, the journey that you've gone through. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to just kind of set the stage based on what you've told me. Okay, is that okay?
Mhm.
And I'm
Yes,
gonna
please.
I'm gonna read. So Regina is working on her new memoir on her path as an Hispanic woman in engineering, traversing the obstacles and opportunities of her journey, as well as the peculiarities working. Okay, working in a male-dominated field. So great. She's the author of the award-winning bestseller, Sins of the System. And this story tells the story of an unthinkable tragedy. In January of 2013, Regina's 15-year-old nephew shot and killed his father, her brother, his mother, and three siblings. She became her nephew's guardian and stood by him through 7 years of legal drama. In her memoir, she recounts her extremely difficult and personal story, I can't even imagine, that affected her large extended family and her entire community. This is a story of courage and conviction, as well as love, compassion, and hope. The book details the failure of not only the juvenile justice system, but many other systems that undergird families and society, including gun safety. This memoir is both a warning and a call to action for families, communities, and our nation. There's a lot to unwind in there, Regina.
Yeah.
Holy cow. So um, take us through what happened. And take us through anyway, my head is just going crazy right now. Take us through what happened and what you went through.
Yeah. In January of 2013, I got a call at 1:30 in the morning. My niece, who is my brother who passed, daughter, uh, told me that she had seen on Facebook that her father and family were dead. And that started the journey. Um, it was obviously incomprehensible at the time. And then we figured out, you know, through talking through law enforcement, that it was my nephew. Now, my nephew was 15 at the time. He showed no signs of this kind of thing, at least as far as we could tell. And he was not a truant. He didn't steal, he wasn't on drugs, nothing like that. But we find out that in his home, he was very isolated. He was supposed to be homeschooled, but they stopped teaching him at third grade. And his father knocked him out at age 11 and gave him a traumatic brain injury. And there was other things in the family. He was being trained as a soldier, so he had access to 8 firearms, 2 AR-15s, and 15,000 rounds of ammunition.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that night, he apparently he had been having visual and audio hallucinations for years, probably right after the TBIs when it started. He had basically a mental break that night, and
Hmm.
there was a command hallucination telling him to complete the mission, which was the mission was to basically get free from his home, and he came up with the very crazy idea of he had to shoot everybody, and he did that, and he used an AR-15 on his father, and he used 22 on the rest of the family, and just going through the discovery of what was going on in that house, which we didn't know, even though we met regularly with my brother, but he was very
Hmm.
cagey or with withheld information. Obviously, there were hints, and I talk about the hints, but you don't put those things together, and you don't anticipate anything like this happening.
Right.
And so it was quite the journey, but I knew my brother well enough. He had been in the gangs. He had been in the army, but he had also been after that been in the gangs in LA.
This is your
And
brother.
this is
This is
my
your
brother.
brother. Okay.
Yeah, but he was a pastor. He came, in one of the he had been a in the gangs, and he got caught for drive-by shooting,
Oh
which
my
never
gosh.
came, which he was never convicted of, but he was up for life, 15 years to life, and he in that time frame he told God that he would work for him if he was able to get free, and so then he went into the ministry and was a pastor, but he had lost his job 10 months before this incident. And I think that's when the family kind of spiraled down, and
Hmm.
this event happened. And so we learned a lot about what was going on after in
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
household.
Sure. Sure.
My nephew was tested as a third grader at age 17
Oh my
in
gosh.
school, and he jumped 4 grades in a period of 19 months because we got him into an adult adolescent treatment center. But he had originally going to get out at 21, and that was appealed. And they said in the sentencing on the appeal that if they had some place to put him for another 5 years, that's what she would have done. Otherwise, since she has to put him in adult prison, they were giving him life plus 7 years.
So this was your nephew,
Mm-hmm.
and so can you just go back a little bit because I didn't quite follow. When he was 21 years old, so what was his sentence after this episode happened?
Initially, he was treated as a child, which we
Okay.
advocated for it, and my other brother, advocated for that. And the based on his progress in the adolescent treatment center and his therapy that he was going through, he got he got convicted as a juvenile, which as a juvenile you're out at age 21 in New Mexico.
Got it. Okay.
But then there was an appeal.
Okay. And then what exactly happened in that appeal?
Well, it was moved to district court for one thing, and then at that age, he was 21 at that age, because they kept him. The appeal came right before he was going to get out,
Okay.
and the end result was that he was sentenced to life plus 7 years.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but
Okay.
the judge said she would have given him 5 years if there was a treatment center or any more juvenile facilities. They age out at 21.
Wait. Okay. 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 So I'm sure we're going to talk about this. I'm sure we're going to talk about this because that's just a massive red flag in my brain. Um, I'd like to go back to you
Mhm.
when you got that phone call and your journey, because you have the different stages of grief and everything. You had multiple things going on. You lost your family, you lost your nephews and nieces. Um, um, you're having to find a way in your heart to forgive this young man. You're going through that of the loss of his innocence. Um, what was how does that happen? How do you work your way through that?
Well, yeah, I know in many families, but certainly in the Hispanic families, there's a sense of responsibility in family. And for me, I felt the strong call to take guardianship of Nehemiah. I hadn't quite forgotten him, forgiven him entirely when I took guardianship. And when I took guardianship of him, he was still psychotic, and he was taking antipsychotics and antidepressants. Um, and I did that because I knew there was more to the story. I hadn't learned everything that was in the story, but I knew there was more to the story because of my journey with my brother. My brother had a very hard growing up. And like I said, he was in the army, and he was, you know, in the Middle East. And I knew there was problems with that, and also with his journey as a gang member. And
Hmm.
and I loved my brother deeply, and I saw his basically his the abuse and the trauma that he went through, and so I knew there was more going on in that household, and I just didn't understand how this happened because this child did not give any indication. So in my own mind, I
Hmm.
says he had to have had some psychological break, and he's a child. He's
Yeah.
15. He's still a child. And I raised three children myself, including a son. And my son was probably the hardest to raise. So I understood that this is not, and this is something is going on here. So that's the premise that I approached it. It just felt like, you know, a lot of family members were living in other states, and it just felt like I was called to
Wow.
do it,
Wow.
basically.
I mean, being able to find I just can't imagine. I can't imagine being able to navigate through those emotions and being able to see it as clearly as it sounds like you were able to see at that time. I personally have lost two friends to gun violence, one to suicide, and and the other was just one of these. He was the son of a Buddhist minister who also happened to be a superior court judge in California. And so really, really wonderful family, really good guy. And next thing I know, in 1994, I'm getting a phone call saying, "Hey, I won't mention his full name, but you know David." And I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Sure." He says, "He's dead." I said, "What do you mean he's dead?" Well, what happened with David is he got it in his mind to uh, rob a bunch of people. And he went to a hotel where there was a meeting of the Palos Verdes Association, and it was at the top of this hotel. And so he goes to the top of the hotel with the intent of robbing these people. And he was very accomplished, and he was a marksman. And the elevator doors open. He walks out, and he's got guns in both hands. And he says, everybody, uh, whatever he said, hold, put your hands up or whatever. Well, unbeknownst to David, the Palos Verdes Association was the Palos Verdes Police Association.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And one of the police officers thought it was a drill. And he got up and he says, this is bullshit. And then he got up, and then David took aim, fired, and the poor man was dead before he hit the floor. another police officer got up, and David did the same thing to him, and they rushed him. And by the time they were done with him, he was gone. David was gone. And um, and you look at this, and to this day, I don't know what happened. It's you know someone I mean, and we had none of the kinds of trauma that your brother and your nephew went through. And so it's like, what? But
Right.
anyway, it's just tragic. And when that happens, I just think about my own emotions of those two situations happen. And that's nothing compared to what you went through. And then you're having to, or you're choosing to deal with it and to help your nephew. I mean, that's one of the biggest, the greatest, the number one theme in my podcast. It's all about love. And
Right.
holy cow, Regina, that is amazing. So yeah,
Well, well, one of my mottos is when in doubt, choose love. Even when raising my children,
yes,
when in doubt, choose love. And the other thing about it is that I don't think I could have lived with myself had I not done that, for this young
yeah,
man. And gun violence touches far too many people, far, far too many people. And suicide by guns is one of the highest in gun violence in our nation. You mentioned the notion of our children. Guns are the number one killer of our children. In the United States, guns kill more children than anything else, than car accidents, than anything. And when, in your friend's case, when people get suicide ideations, it's like this, your technology, just like me, it's just like this loop that doesn't have an exit, you know? And there's a book by one of the mothers of one of the killers of Columbine, Sue Klebold, and she wrote a book about her son, and she didn't see it. And a lot of these cases where there's an attack, like the one you described, and to some degree, I think it was also my nephew's, it was more a wish to die. And they did not have the courage to just kill themselves. And
wow,
that's what happened to this young man in the Columbine case. But in his case, he hooked up with a guy that was also homicidal, and there was a lot of things going on in his school. But Sue Klebold, classic good parent, conscientious in Colorado, and her son was one of the killers for the Columbine. And it's that suicidal ideation, and that she's dedicated her life
wow,
since then to suicide awareness and stuff like that. And it was after the whole thing that they found that she found things in his room that indicated that he was suicidal, and they put a little journal of his writings together. And it's hard to find out. One of the things I talk about in my book is that we have to, and the difficulty was this: my nephew didn't go to a regular public school, so there was nobody else
right,
aware of
right,
what was
yeah,
happening in this
yeah. He was
child's life.
homeschooled. Yes,
Yeah. And it's very important for us to one of the things in this bipartisan bill associated with gun violence and gun safety is that they dedicated much more money for schools to get social workers and counselors. And that's what needs to be in schools rather than guns. And so, because they need to be able to monitor these children and what
yes,
they're facing and what they're going through, either in their home environment. And, the entire idea of gun sense laws and gun advocacy, which is what I do, is to keep guns out of the hands that might hurt themselves or others.
yeah,
Um, and children, you know, their brains aren't developed. And that's the thing that we talked about with the other advocacy I do, which is juvenile justice, is that, there should be for children until they're age 25, because that's when their brain is developed. So if a child does something, even as horrendous as what my nephew did in the situation that he was in, which was a bad situation, um, you should be able to see if he can be salvageable up to age 25. Give him the aid to 25 and see if he's, and help him transition. Now, some people may disagree with me, but I believe strongly that we shouldn't be throwing our children away and that we are failing as adults. We are failing as adults. If we cannot protect our children, we are failing as adults.
Well, in the case of your nephew, if I understood you right, when he was 21, the judge who sentenced him to life plus said that if there was help available for him, she'd consider letting him go when he was 25. But it was
Right,
because, I mean, and that's a that I mean, are you serious? Right? I mean, get him the help and
right, exactly.
and don't throw them away. So yeah, and folks, I just want to let you know this is not a conversation about gun control. This is not a conversation about gun anything. As Regina was talking about, she talked about gun advocacy. And so this is not a political conversation. This is the bill that Regina is talking about is a bill that's being considered right now. And it's all about taking care of and getting help for our children.
Right.
And who can argue with that? Forget which side of the gun control issue that or the gun issue you're on. Um, my friend who took his own life was my best friend
Mm.
when I was 15 years old, and I'm trying mightily not to this was in 19 he killed himself in 1977. And so this is almost 50 years ago, and um I'm still not over it. Um, but I got a call one night where his parents were looking for him and said, "Hey, do you know where Mike is?" And I said, I don't know." But and so I called all around and called all of our friends, and I couldn't find him. And so an hour or two later, I get a phone call from the family saying, "We found him." I said, "Okay, great. Good night." And the next morning, I went to school and I told all my friends, "Hey, listen, don't. I don't know what happened last night with Mike. Let's not make a big deal of it." And I went to a friend of mine as part of our gang. His name was Kerry, and I was talking to him. He says, "I know Mike's dead." I said, "What?" He said, "Mike's dead." And I started yelling at him, and so then I decided to look for his little sister who was going to our high school at the time. I couldn't find her. They had found him next to his bed, and I had no clue, no idea. And he was like my best friend. Um, so a lot of guilt, um, a lot of self-reflection. I can't even imagine what you went through. I mean, you went through multiple levels of grief, of shock, of God bless you. God bless you, Regina.
Yeah,
So
well, more than 70% of suicides are by gun, and most gun suicides are successful, unfortunately.
yeah, guns have a way of being that way. So, as we life is a lot of things, one of which is tragedy.
Right.
We all have experienced, are experiencing, or will experience tragedy in our lives. That's what it is. That's all it is. And if you were to have, if you're speaking with my audience,
Mhm.
what experience can you share with them that they can consider when they're going through something really bad in their life?
I think the other thing that I realized through my journey, because I've gone through other tragic situations in my growing up, but or difficult situations, traumatic to some degree, is when tragedy strikes, don't ask why, ask what's mine to do. What
Oh,
is mine to do?
thank you.
Because why will just drive you crazy, and that's not where you need to be in that situation. Just and go after healing. I went for a 10-day retreat at a Golden Willow in the Taos area, and it's a grief retreat center. So know how to take care of yourself, number one, but then ask what's mine to do. And it was clear what was mine to do was to be there for this child.
Don't ask why. I wish I knew that because I won't do that anymore. And but thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for because boy, oh boy, and you are continuing to use that experience to help help others. And I love that. I love that. I love
Well,
you for that.
one of the laws that got passed on juvenile justice, my nephew will now get a chance at parole 22 years earlier.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you go.
And
And
so
think of
advocacy is important.
yeah, and think of the thousands and thousands of other children that you're helping. And
Yep.
and past, present, and future. So with that, Regina, is there anything else you want to share?
No, but I do donate
Yes.
80% of my royalties to campaign for the fair sentencing of youth and also Everytown for gun safety. So
Okay.
I don't make money on this book at all. I just do it for love and for awareness.
And the name of the book, if you could keep holding it up, Regina, is Sins of the System: Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children. And I presume they can find that on Amazon.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You could order it through
Wonderful.
your local bookstore.
Wonderful. And if people want to get information about you, Regina, where can they go? What can they do?
The best place is transcendingfutures at gmail.com.
Transcendingfutures and gmail.com. And if folks, and what was the name of your healing center?
Golden Willow in the
Golden
Taos
Willow.
area,
Okay. Okay.
Taos, New Mexico area. Yeah.
Taos, New Mexico. What a wonderful place to have a healing center. My goodness. And
Mm-hmm.
and I presume on your website, if people want to donate, you give them an opportunity there.
Well, mostly I sell my book.
Okay.
That's the donation there. So
Okay. Okay. Um,
mhm.
uh, but look at your heart. Look to your heart.
Mhm.
And if your heart tells you to buy her book, please do so. Regina, thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
thank you
Thank
for
you, John.
and everybody, her name again is Regina Griego. Last name is Griego. And the name of her book is Sins of the System. Regina, thank you for what you do. I love you for I love you, period. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you, John, so
Okay.
much.
Thank you, everybody. I love you. God bless you. We'll see you later. Bye.